The champagne was still fizzing when the screen went live. I remember standing at the back of that rooftop, the one with the Edison bulb strung between iron posts, the kind of venue that costs more per hour than most people make in a week, and I watched my sister Celeste turn toward the giant display screen behind her, laughing at something her fiancé Declan had just whispered in her ear. She had no idea. She was wearing a silk dress the color of champagne. Her hair was done in that effortless way that takes 3 hours to perfect. She looked like everything she had always wanted the world to believe she was. Then the music cut. And the screen flickered. At first, people thought it was part of the event. A slideshow. An engagement highlight reel. A few people even raised their glasses, ready to toast. But then the first screenshot appeared. Large. White background. Black text. Her name at the top of the message thread. I do not even like him. I just wanted to see if I could take him from her. The room did not gasp all at once. It went quiet in sections, like a wave moving in reverse. First the people nearest the screen. Then the ones on the left side of the rooftop. Then the influencers near the bar who had been half-watching while they fixed their lighting angles. One by one, phones dropped. Glasses lowered. Conversations died. Declan, her fiancé, was standing 5 feet to her left. I watched his face go through 4 different expressions in about 3 seconds. Confusion. Recognition. Hurt. Then something cold. Celeste turned to the screen. And I watched the exact moment she understood. She spun around, searching the crowd, and her eyes found mine across that rooftop. I did not smile. I did not move. I just looked at her. She screamed, "This is fake. Someone edited this. Nadia, you did this." And I said, quietly enough that only the people closest to me heard, "I did not have to do anything, Celeste. I just stopped protecting you. But let me back up. Because none of this makes sense unless you understand where it started. And it started a long, long time before that rooftop. Growing up, Celeste and I existed on 2 completely different planes in the same household, like 2 planets orbiting the same sun but never touching. She was the sun. I was just trying not to get burned. Our mother, Renata, was not a cruel woman. She was just enchanted by Celeste in the way that certain people get enchanted by beautiful, electric, effortlessly charming people. Celeste could walk into a room and every head turned. She had this laugh, this loud, uncontained laugh, that made you want to be the one who caused it. She had opinions about everything and she stated them like facts, and somehow people believed her. I used to watch her do it and think, how does she make it look so easy? I was the other one. The one who read too much. The one who stayed quiet at family dinners because by the time I worked up the courage to say something, the conversation had already moved on. My father, Terence, would sometimes catch my eye across the table and give me this small, tired nod, like he understood. But even he would eventually turn back toward Celeste, because that is where the energy was. If you've made it this far, you already know this story is getting good. Drop where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe. You are so low-key, Nadia, people used to tell me, and they meant it as a neutral observation, but it always landed like a criticism. I was not low-key. I was observant. There is a difference. And what I observed, over years and years of watching my sister operate, was a pattern. A very specific, very deliberate pattern that I did not fully name until I was 26 years old, sitting in my car outside a CVS, crying over a man named Brennan. But before Brennan, there was Elliot. Elliot was the first. I was 22, fresh out of college, working an entry-level job at a marketing firm in Charlotte. He was sweet. A little awkward in a way that felt genuine rather than calculated. We had been dating for about 4 months when Celeste came to visit for the weekend. I remember being excited to introduce them. I was still operating under the assumption that my sister was my ally, that whatever rivalry existed between us as children had dissolved somewhere in our late teens like most sibling tensions do. I genuinely believed that. We went to dinner. Celeste was charming and funny and told a story about a road trip that had everyone at the table in stitches. Elliot laughed louder than anyone. I laughed too. I thought it was a great night. 3 weeks later, Elliot called me to say he did not think we were compatible. A month after that, I saw his car parked outside Celeste's apartment building. When I asked her about it, She shrugged and said, "We ran into each other." He reached out, "Nadia. What was I supposed to do?" And I said something like, "I do not know, maybe tell him to call me?" And she looked at me with this expression, this almost bored expression, and said, "If he wanted to be with you, he would have stayed with you." I filed that line away. I did not know yet that I would need it later. Then there was Rhett. 24 years old, both of us. A graphic designer I met through a mutual friend. Smart. Creative. We used to spend Sunday afternoons at this bookstore on Park Road, just wandering the aisles and arguing about which authors were overrated. It was one of those relationships that felt easy in the way that easy things sometimes feel too good to last. Celeste met him at a family cookout. Just once. I watched her talk to him for maybe 15 minutes by the drink table, and I told myself it was fine, it was casual, she was just being social. Because I trusted her. Because she was my sister. Rhett started being weird about 2 weeks later. Canceling plans. Shorter texts. That particular kind of distant that feels deliberate. When I finally asked him directly what was going on, he said something that stopped me cold. "Celeste said you have always had a jealousy problem. That you get really possessive in relationships. She was just trying to warn me." I sat with that for a very long time. She had told my boyfriend, a man she had met once, at a family cookout, for 15 minutes, that I had a jealousy problem. She had planted a seed so precise, so targeted, that by the time I noticed the damage it was already done. After Rhett, I was smarter. Or I thought I was. Brennan was someone I kept almost completely separate from my family life. We dated for 7 months before he even knew I had a sister. I did not post him. I did not bring him to family events. I told myself it was because things were still new, but honestly, I think some part of me already knew, even if I had not fully admitted it to myself yet. The one time they met, it was an accident. My mother threw a last-minute birthday dinner for my aunt, and I brought Brennan because I did not want to show up alone. Celeste was there. The interaction was brief. She was pleasant. She asked Brennan a few questions about his work, complimented his watch, and that was it. That was it. 15 minutes. Maybe less. 6 days later, Brennan sat me down and told me he did not think he was ready for something serious. I asked him if Celeste had contacted him. He paused for just a half-second too long before saying no. "She said you have always been jealous of her," he told me, almost word for word what Rhett had said. Like she had a script. Like she had used it enough times to get it exactly right. That night, sitting in my car outside that CVS with mascara on my cheekbones and the heat running because it was February, something in me went very, very still. This was not coincidence. Coincidence runs out after the first time. Maybe the second. By the third, it is a pattern. By the third, it is a choice. I drove home. I did not cry anymore. I made a list. Elliot. Gone after meeting Celeste. Rhett. Gone after meeting Celeste, with a specific line she had fed him. Brennan. Gone after the same line, almost verbatim. She was not stealing my boyfriends because she wanted them. Celeste discarded every one of them within weeks. She was stealing them because she could. Because proving she could take something of mine gave her something that actually liking someone never would. I confronted her 2 days later. I drove to her apartment, knocked on the door, and when she answered in her silk robe looking like she had just gotten off a brand campaign call, I told her I knew what she had been doing. I told her I had connected it. I told her that the line about jealousy, using my own insecurities as a weapon against the men I dated, was calculated and cruel, and I needed her to tell me why. She tilted her head. She actually tilted her head. And then she smiled in this slow, almost lazy way and said, "Nadia. If they wanted you, they would have stayed with you." Same line. The exact same line. Word for word. And then she closed the door. I stood in her hallway for a full minute before I walked back to my car. And in that minute, something shifted. The part of me that had spent years being hurt, being the invisible sister, the second one, the low-key one, went very quiet. And a different part of me, the one that had been observing and filing away information for 30 years, stood up. I went home and I started researching. Not Celeste herself. I knew Celeste. I knew her tactics, her patterns, the specific way she operated. What I did not know was whether she had been doing this longer than I realized. Whether there was anyone else who had watched this happen and kept records. I started going back further. College. High school. Anyone who had been close to Celeste and then suddenly was not. And that is how I found Waverly Odom. Waverly had been Celeste's best friend from age 14 to 21. They were inseparable in the way that only certain young women can be, always in each other's photos, always at the same events, sharing a study abroad program in Barcelona the summer after their sophomore year of college. And then, abruptly, in the fall of Celeste's senior year, Waverly disappeared. Not literally disappeared. But from Celeste's life? Gone overnight. And from Celeste's telling of it, which I had heard exactly twice in vague terms, Waverly had gone through a hard time and made some choices that were hard to support. Celeste always said it with this sad head-shaking sympathy that made it clear she was the reasonable one in the dissolution. What I found online told a different story. There had been a situation in college. A blog post, now deleted but cached in a web archive, written by someone in their friend group at the time. The gist of it was this: Waverly had been dating someone. Celeste had interfered. When Waverly confronted her, Celeste had gone to their entire social circle first and told a story so convincing, painting Waverly as unstable, paranoid, accusatory, that by the time Waverly tried to tell her side, no one believed her. Waverly withdrew from the group. Changed her social media. Graduated early. Left. I read that cached post 3 times. Then I searched for Waverly Odom's current whereabouts. What I found stopped me mid-scroll. Waverly was not the ruined, withdrawn, broken person Celeste had implied. Waverly had rebuilt entirely. She had spent 2 years doing investigative work for a regional publication in Nashville, then pivoted to digital media, and in the last 3 years had built a following of nearly 400,000 people on a platform where she ran long-form exposés on influencer culture, fake personas, brand deal fraud, manufactured relationships for sponsorship money. She was smart. She was methodical. She was credible. And when I clicked on her most recent video, I noticed the description said she was currently based in Charlotte. My hands were shaking slightly when I typed out the message. I told her my name. I told her I was Celeste's sister. I told her I had been watching a pattern play out for years, and I had reason to believe she had experienced the same thing. I told her I was not looking to go to war. I was looking to understand. She responded within 3 hours. I have been waiting for someone to reach out, she wrote. I will be honest with you. I have a folder on my computer that I have not opened in 2 years because I decided it was not worth my mental health to look at it. But I never deleted it. We met at a coffee place in Noda on a Wednesday afternoon. Waverly was tall, with natural hair pulled back at the sides, and the kind of calm, steady eye contact that tells you someone has done serious therapy and come out the other side with something harder than before, something that looked a lot like clarity. She ordered an oat milk latte and set her laptop bag on the chair beside her and looked at me the way a person looks at someone they have been expecting for a long time. You look like her, she said. Not unkindly. Just as an observation. Around the eyes. I know, I said. You are nothing like her though, she added. I can already tell. I did not know what to do with that, so I just said, how can you tell? Because you are nervous, she said. Celeste is never nervous. Nervous people have something to lose. She does not operate that way. That one line told me that Waverly understood my sister in exactly the way I needed someone to understand her. We talked for 4 hours. She told me her version of the college situation. All of it, start to finish, with a precision that told me she had replayed it many times. The boyfriend, the interference, the preemptive smear campaign. She told me about the voice memos she had saved during the aftermath, conversations she had recorded because she knew, even then, that no one would believe her word against Celeste's. She opened her laptop and showed me the folder. There were screenshots. Texts from Celeste to mutual friends during the fallout, texts that directly contradicted everything Celeste had said publicly. There were audio clips, 2 of them, recorded during phone calls where Celeste's voice was clear and recognizable. In one of them, She was laughing about Waverley's reaction. She actually thought he was going to choose her, she said. It is almost sad. I recognized that laugh. I had heard it my entire life. What do you want to do with this? Waverley asked me. I want to wait, I said. She looked at me. For what? For the right moment. The moment when it will actually matter. We did not have to wait long. 2 months later, Celeste announced her engagement to Declan Ashworth, tech sales, 31, genuinely good-looking, with a family in Atlanta and a LinkedIn that read like someone who had actually earned what he had. She announced it in a video. Within 48 hours, she had 2 brand partnership inquiries about the engagement. She started calling herself a lifestyle content creator focused on love, growth, and authentic living. I watched her build the narrative in real time. The engagement photo sets. The ring close-ups. The how he proposed Instagram story that got shared 40,000 times. She was constructing a public identity out of this relationship, and that identity was worth money. Real money. Her following jumped 60,000 in a month. Waverley and I talked every few days. We were careful. We were not emotional about it, that was the most important thing. Every time I felt the anger creep up, I reminded myself, emotion is noise. Strategy is signal. The engagement party was Celeste's idea, of course. She live-streamed the announcement and within days had it planned, a rooftop venue, a guest list that included local media personalities and a few mid-tier influencers who would post about it, and a screen at the back of the space displaying a curated slideshow of her and Declan's relationship. A screen. When Waverley heard that detail, she was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "That is almost too easy." We did not hack anything. We did not need to. The AV company contracted for the event was a small operation, and the contact information for the evening's technical coordinator was listed in the venue's vendor directory online. It took Waverley about 20 minutes to make the right connection. She had covered enough tech and media events to know how these setups worked. The slideshow was loaded onto a shared link. All that was needed was access to that link and a pre-scheduled replacement file set to go live 30 minutes into the party, after the first round of toasts and right in the window where Declan would be called to the bar to greet his family who was flying in late. We prepared the file meticulously. The screenshots. The audio clips, subtitled and time-stamped. The texts from the college situation, the texts about Rhett, the ones about Brennan, messages Waverley had gathered from people willing to come forward once they understood the full picture. Each slide simple. Clean. No dramatic music. No editing tricks. Just the words, in Celeste's own style, in her own voice. The night of the party, I got there early and stood near the back bar. I wore a dark green dress and I kept my face neutral. I watched Celeste float through the room in her champagne silk, laughing, touching people's arms, performing joy so fluently it looked real. I watched Declan watch her with the face of a man who believed every bit of it. 28 minutes in, his cousin arrived from Atlanta and someone pulled him toward the entrance. The host tapped a microphone and invited everyone to look at the screen for a special message from the couple. The file went live. The first slide was just a screenshot. Her name. His name. The date of the message. And the words, in blue text bubble white, I do not even like him. I just wanted to see if I could take him from her. The room went quiet in sections. Celeste was mid-sip when she looked up. I watched her read it. I watched her eyes go wide and then go flat and then go searching. More slides. Her voice, in the audio clip, captioned in clean white font. The laugh. The line, it is almost sad. A text to a friend about Rhett, I told him the jealousy thing. He bought it completely. Another about Brennan, same move, worked again. She has no idea. Someone started crying near the front. I do not know who. Declan walked back in from the entrance holding 2 drinks and stopped moving when he looked up at the screen. Celeste found her voice. This is fake. Someone fabricated this. Nadia, she pointed at me across the room. She did this. She has always been jealous. That is what this is. And then Waverley stepped forward from the left side of the room, where she had been standing quietly near a pillar, and said in the calm, measured voice of someone who has done this professionally, "My name is Waverly Odom. I have been documenting this behavior for 9 years. Everything on this screen is backed up in original format. The metadata is intact. Every source is available for verification." The room was completely still. A brand rep I recognized from Celeste's comment section was already on her phone. Celeste looked at Waverly. She looked at me. She looked at Declan. Declan set both drinks down on a nearby table. He straightened his jacket. He walked toward a door at the far end of the rooftop and pushed through it without looking back. 2 members of the venue's event staff approached Celeste and asked her quietly if she would like to step inside. She went. She had no other option. I did not follow. I got my coat. I thanked Waverly, who squeezed my hand once and said, it was the right time. And I left. At 11:47 that night. My phone rang. I was already home. I was sitting on my couch with a cup of tea and the television on mute when I heard the knock on my front door 20 minutes later. Because when Celeste really needs something, she does not call. She shows up. She looked different without the room. Without the lighting and the crowd and the performance. She looked smaller and older and genuinely shaken in a way I had never seen her look before. Her eye makeup had tracked in 2 thin lines below her lashes. She stood in my doorway and she looked at me and she said, "You ruined my life." I looked at her for a long moment. I thought about Elliot. I thought about Rhett. I thought about sitting in my car in February with mascara on my face and the heat running. I thought about the way she had closed the door in my face with that smile. And I said, "No. I just stopped protecting you." She started crying then. Real crying, not performance crying, though honestly, by that point I was no longer certain I could tell the difference. She said things about jealousy and about how I had always wanted what she had and about how the family would take her side. She cycled through all of it. I stood in my doorway and I let her finish. And then I said, "Celeste, go home." She left. The engagement was over by morning. Declan's family put out a brief statement. Celeste went quiet on social media for the first time in 4 years. 3 brand partnerships issued terminations of their agreements within 72 hours. I watched it from a distance, not with satisfaction exactly, but with something that felt like the specific relief you get when a sound you have been hearing for so long you stopped noticing it finally stops. My mother called me the day after. She had seen things circulating online and she wanted to know what I knew and whether I had anything to do with it. I told her I was not going to have that conversation over the phone. She went quiet for a moment and then she said, "Nadia. She is your sister." And I said, "I know. She is also someone who spent years using me as a target and then acting like my pain was the unreasonable part." My mother did not respond to that. She said she needed time to process. I gave her time. I'm still giving her time. Some things take longer to metabolize than others, especially when you have spent decades believing a certain version of your family is true. I understand that. I do not need her to believe me immediately. I need her to eventually be willing to look at the evidence, and I have faith that she will get there. My father called 3 days later. He did not ask me whether I did it. He just said, "Are you okay?" And I said yes. And he said, "Good." And we talked for 20 minutes about other things, his garden, a book he was reading, the way the weather had turned. It was one of the most normal conversations we had ever had, and somehow it meant more to me than any dramatic validation would have. Waverly published a piece 3 weeks later, not about Celeste specifically, but about the behavioral pattern, the tactics, the psychological mechanics of a person who competes rather than connects. She changed names. She was careful. But the people who needed to understand it, understood it. The piece was shared 40,000 times in its first week. Someone in the comments wrote, "I grew up with someone exactly like this and I spent 20 years thinking I was the problem." Waverly screenshot that comment and sent it to me with no caption. I started dating again about 4 months after the engagement party. A man named Corbin, who I met through a colleague at a work event neither of us particularly wanted to attend. He is quiet in the way that I am quiet, not low-key, just observant. He asks good questions and he listens to the answers, and he does not perform interest, he is just actually interested. He makes terrible puns and takes them very seriously. He remembered something I mentioned in passing 3 weeks after I mentioned it. I have not introduced him to my family yet, and he has not pressed me on it. He just said, when I explained in broad terms that family was complicated, okay? I am in no rush. And I believed him. There is a version of this story where I am the villain. Where I am the jealous sister who orchestrated a public humiliation out of bitterness and wounded pride. Celeste has told that version. My mother, for a while, seemed to be considering it. But here is what I know. I know that the men I loved did not leave because I was inadequate. I know that a pattern repeated 3 times, with the same scripted line, is not bad luck. I know that documentation is not fabrication, and that truth, when it is backed up and time-stamped and verified, does not require a villain, it just requires exposure. And I know this. She spent years believing that what she could take from me was proof of her power. But power is not taking what belongs to someone else. Power is knowing that you never needed to compete in the first place. I knew that. I just needed the right moment to let her find out.